just gonna come out and say it. The last time I had this much fun with a villain from an animated movie is Lord Shen from Kung Fu Panda 2. And that came out in 2011. With very few exceptions, there has been a severe lack of animated films that contain the balance of entertainment and genuine, horrifying threat in the past decade that echoed the legacy left by Disney's from the Renaissance era and earlier. However, among the many other incredible things that make Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse the cinematic masterpiece that it is today, the Spot has joined our ragtag team of exceptions. A man who is underestimated by everyone, even his own writers, is putting the space-time continuum in jeopardy for our beloved characters. Now, in time for the film's first anniversary, I want to revisit this fantastic movie and explain why I love the Spot, and why I think he's not just a sensational Spider-Verse villain, but one of my favorite villains, period. Let's begin, shall we?
Barbie meets Spot, Spider-Verse, Olivia is responsible. Olivia, why did you
And,
create?
Awesome.
Olivia is responsible.
Why are you fucking crazy?
First, let's begin with the origin of the Spot. No, not that one, but we'll get there. The Spot was created by writer Al Milgrom and artist Herb Trimp and was introduced in 1985. His original name is Jonathan Owen, which is play on words for, I'm not kidding you, Johnny on the Spot. Milgrom, you absolute madman. And it turns out a bagel wasn't the only thing that led to the creation of him. Al may have accidentally taken the idea from a 1955 Looney Tunes cartoon he saw when he was younger and kept it in his subconscious called The Whole Idea, where scientists create black portals but then get stolen and are used to commit crimes. The mind is a fascinating thing sometimes. I have a link to the cartoon in the description if you're curious to check it out, it's pretty good. Anyway, the Spot's origin story and his first appearance are somewhat similar to his Spider-Verse counterpart, where he was working for Kingpin, and then when Spider-Man first encountered him, he couldn't take him seriously. Cut to a few decades later, and some other appearances in comics and TV here and there, where producer Avi Arad pitched the Spot as Spider-Verse's next formidable foe to writers Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, who dismissed the idea at first. As Miller stated, Avi was like, you know, people don't realize how powerful he is. And then Chris and I came back around going, oh yeah, people don't realize how powerful he is. And obviously the fact that he had these portals were relevant, and we're like, well, wouldn't it be interesting to take a person who is overlooked as dumb and feels left out and lonely and wants to prove themselves? The same arc that Miles was going on, but a dark version of it. We were like, oh, we probably should have listened to him instead of dismissing him the way everyone dismisses the Spot. However, they were not the ones who came up with the bagel connection. That title goes to Dan Slott, a comic book writer at Marvel, who revealed in a tweet last year that he pitched the Spot and the bagel guy being the same person. And the rest is bagel effect history. I really do love the fact that Miles and Spot are connected in that way without Spot explicitly saying, we're not so different. There's a sense of poetic tragedy to a hero and villain inadvertently creating one another. It's part of the reason why I love Batman 89. Who knows if Miles has danced with the devil in the pale moonlight, but Spot has gone through one heck of a journey when it comes to his conceptualization. In the film, we first see Spot as an awkward guy just trying to earn money in a very ethical and peaceful manner. Or, as the screenplay puts it, a ding-dong announces the arrival of a total ding-dong, Jonathan Owen, aka the Spot. He pats the bananas. What a dweeb. To visualize his inexperience with his abilities, the crew added these blue line underdrawings on his body that distort as the movie progresses to symbolize his power growing.
But I love the Spot like as this idea that he's this work in progress. He's an unfinished product, and that's why he's got all these like sketch lines and blue sketch and using the visuals to help tell the story that he's this untapped potential that Miles is kind of overlooking.
You can even see it in the first sneak peek photo that was revealed at the Annecy Film Festival a year before the movie came out. And with various animation tests and concept art from the art book, you can tell they went through a lot of trial and error. He was originally going to be a lot more expressive by having a mouth. Bro is flabbergasted. There were some ideas of him just having eyes. Eventually he was going to have just one big old spot on his face he could contort in any way he pleased. It does look really awesome, but the head of character animation for the film, Alan Hawkins, believed it wasn't right since he was starting to resemble Venom. We've seen Venom unnecessarily pushed into a Spider-Man movie before, and we all know how that went. Spot was also going to look a bit more doughy, and I mean evil Pillsbury Doughboy, as you can see from this hysterical animation test of the poor guy just wanting to eat a bagel, as well as these awesome tests done by Spencer Wan. They're so adorable. I love the idea of the portals on his body being the Spider-Verse itself. This galaxy look is such a great touch, but they went with watercolor and ink instead, and they actually had to invent new animation software just to execute it, which they did so masterfully. The crew also decided that Spot should be ripped away from his ability to express emotion through his face, period, which gets directly acknowledged in the final cut of the film.
Because of you, I lost my job, my life, my face.
Eventually, it all started coming together. Using the self-portraits of expressionist painter Egon Schiele, they began making him more timid and socially awkward with his posture, hand posing, and body language instead of facial expressions, which means they all have to be slightly exaggerated in order to compensate with no face here. It speaks volumes, as seen by this amazing reference footage by Eric DeCarlis, who animated a bunch of characters for a bunch of shots, all with varying body movement, and it's so impressive. There's more where that came from, so all the footage I referenced will be linked in the description if you want to check it out, which I highly recommend you do. All that's left, I believe, is the voice. Whoever could it be? Can I just say that 2023 was absolutely Jason Schwartzman's year? That dude was busy. Across the Spider-Verse, Asteroid City, The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. I mean, he absolutely deserved the title of Letterboxd's most watched actor. He was up there for me on my 2023 stats. My introduction to him was in 2013 when he played Richard Sherman from the iconic Sherman Brothers duo in Saving Mr. Banks. Call it Disney propaganda, I'm aware, but also shut up, I love this movie. One of my favorite scenes is him playing a demo version of Feed the Birds on the piano when Tom Hanks' Disney walks in to listen. It shows how great Jason is with subtle facial expressions. I love the double take he does when he realizes that the person who walked in was Walt. He gives him an acknowledging nod and then smiles when he sings You Know They Are Smiling. The movie in general introduced me to other actors that are now my all-time favorites. Anyway, jump forward to 2019 when he voiced the main character Jesper in the 2D animated masterpiece that is Klaus. Playing the Cusco-like jerk with a character arc, but he's so fun and hysterical to watch that you really connect with him. This was what made me realize how good of an actor and voice actor Jason Schwartzman is. Eventually, the announcement came that he was voicing Spot, and I thought it was a match made in heaven. Both pre and post across, I've watched more of his movies and I've been treated to more of his voice acting chops. Of course, starting with Wes Anderson's works like the charming Ash and Fantastic Mr. Fox, but also the delightful Jack in the Darjeeling Limited.
I'm on a journey of self-improvement.
And you came to India.
OMG, Darjeeling Limited reference? As well as my entire high school sinking into the sea. The plot is exactly what the title is, and Jason plays a fictionalized version of the director Dash Shaw. It's got a really unique art style, so I recommend you give it a watch. He mentioned spidey senses at one point, and that made me laugh. But going back to the Spot, he combines the quirkiness from all the Wes Anderson films he's been in and the villainy from Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. The director shared in the commentary track that he constantly riffed while recording his lines, and it was difficult for the editorial team to catalog all the audio files. It reminds me of how Robin Williams recorded around 16 hours of dialogue for the Genie. There's some lines I noticed that weren't in the screenplay, like,
I've never robbed anybody in my life. Please don't make this a bad experience for me. You missed. You can't contain the Spot. Boop. Go away. See you later. Thanks so much. Like Robin Hood, if he gave to himself. Oh wow, is this curry powder? There's no reason to bring wood to this.
Jason does use his regular voice, which I think sounds great, but when he needs to be a little more evil, the sound editors do this really cool thing with his voice. They take the audio clip, they duplicate it, they add some demonic reverb, there's even a little bit of an echo in there, and it sounds amazing. I've never been terrified by a Jason Schwartzman character, and I think that should happen more often. He does a really great job with those scenes of Spot needing to be more intimidating. I still remember seeing the movie for the first time at its Thursday night preview and being like, whoa, when he yelled,
Back where it all started.
And especially,
Look at me.
his voice is really dynamic, and I love how he raises it at the perfect moment and grits his teeth for lines like,
I was in this collider room when you blew it up.
I'm going to talk more about his line deliveries later on, so I'll save it for that. But I will say that this is the scene where we get our first taste of his theme. Oh hey, speaking of which, insert lengthy screed about how Daniel Pemberton was most definitely absolutely robbed at the Oscars this year. Now that we got that out of the way. The guy went above and beyond compared to what he did on Into. Since Across expands upon the story by taking us to different universes and introducing us to new villains, Daniel was able to experiment to his heart's content, and he went all freaking out. I'm seeing the movie with the live orchestra this October, and guys, I am so excited to witness this soundtrack unfold in person. I saw the first movie live last year, that's where this clip is from, and Daniel was there helping out on stage, doing Kingpin's pen clicking, Peter B's keyboard clacking, some whistling. It was amazing, and that among the many cues and leitmotifs that I adore, one of my favorites is, of course, spots. And it wasn't until I started writing this video that I finally discovered how he created it. I scoured interviews just to find something, anything, and I found this one from Gold Derby. Daniel states it was the most difficult theme for him to develop for the film, and he explains his journey in finding a motif that exudes dread to the audience.
And originally I had all these ideas for Spot that were based on these kind of synthesized sort of body hole noises, and we made tons of these and then realized they just didn't really cut through in the film in the way I wanted to, and didn't really create the sense of dread, like you say, that character has.
It wasn't until he created this motif for the detuned cello and layering the audio file on top of one another is how you get that dreadful theme. And I mean that in the best possible way. Similar to how his physical transformation symbolizes him progressively becoming unstable, Daniel did the same thing sonically by lengthening the distance between each note of his theme as his power grows. All this time I thought it was a distorted wolf howl, similar to how Prowler's is a distorted elephant trumpet. It's such a lonely sound with how it continuously wails, and even though it's not a wolf, I still think it's sounding like it fits thematically since his transformation ostracized him and his motivation of wanting to be taken seriously. He became a lone wolf and he wants to be included back into society, his pack so to speak. We first hear Spot's theme in the aforementioned
Back where it all started!
which is when he and Miles are at the crucible of their connection, and the string section absolutely pops off when Spot begins explaining his backstory. It's also when we see a sliver of the darkness lurking beneath his goofy exterior, as the previous track, My Name is Miles Morales, played during the first half of their fight. It's upbeat to reintroduce Miles to the audience, as well as enhancing the absurdity of Spot's powers while incorporating elements that appear throughout the scene. Felt tip pens when Miles is drawing, spray cans when he's doing graffiti art, punches landing when he's beating up the bad guy. The Jeopardy bells? Are you kidding me? Would y'all believe me if I said a goose honk was record scratching in this track? Well, if you don't, too bad. It's true and I got proof.
Goose it. When am I starting? Whenever you want.
This could have been an Oscar-nominated soundtrack. Spot Holds 1 is when Spot discovers his pocket dimension, and though his theme is still present, it's played as more ethereal than eerie as he explores this little world. It's coupled with a flowing harp that immediately makes us associate this place with heaven. I'm positive we'll be seeing more of it and beyond. Maybe there's going to be a fight scene where Miles and the other spiders are transported into it, and the cue we heard in this movie will have a hellish twist to it. I bet it'll also go to dark mode and reflect what looks to be his new color palette, and that would be awesome. Later on, when Miles is reunited with Gwen, we get Creation of the Spot. It's got a pensive beat as Gwen's watch for Count Spot making his mini collider. It slowly crescendos excellently until it explodes and Spot gets his first taste of raw power. The rest of the track quiets down when Jess tells Gwen about Mumbattan, and then when Gwen says goodbye to Miles. I almost died. Ugh. I just died in your arms tonight. Let's jump ahead all the way to the very end of the movie with Start a Band, one of my favorite tracks, where Spot returns to he and Miles' dimension. Now I want you to listen very closely to this clip. Did you hear it? How convenient is it that we hear this man horrifically screaming right before Jeff shows up on screen, and he barely misses the entrance of the Spot as he begins his prowl to wreak havoc?
This is me screaming.
I can't remember the last time I loved a movie's final scene this much. How is this movie real? The scream is such a great addition since it reminds you of the stakes that are looming over Miles and all of our other favorite characters, and it's just icing on the cake to this track that beautifully combines Miles' Destiny theme, Prowler's motif, and Gwen's guitar and drums, and of course a slight hint of Spots as well. Daniel Pemberton did an absolutely spectacular job with the soundtrack. There's so many other things I adore about it, like how he recorded the off-kilter whistles on his iPhone in this London cemetery. Gwen's theme is just a much faster tempo version of the OG Spider-Man theme. The movie's Spider-Man theme is quite literally saying, Spider-Man. And Daniel thinks a good superhero theme is if you're able to sing the hero's name as you hear it. And the operatic lyrics in Vulture scene is just the Wikipedia article of Leonardo da Vinci Google translated into Italian. This guy is a mad lad. It's a sonic experience I can't say I've ever heard before, and I cannot wait to see how he will be able to top it and beyond. However, I have yet to discuss my favorite scene of the movie. I'm dedicating an entire chapter to this because I love it so much, and there's so many details I love pausing and scrubbing through frame by frame and rewinding a billion times, so let's get into it. The Mumbattan sequence is quite extended, so I'll say this favorite scene of mine begins when Spot enters Alchemax. I can't really say he breaks in because, well, he doesn't break anything. He's become so in control of his power that his portals allow him to essentially phase through walls. Even though he hasn't become all-powerful yet, the movie is still building up the threat he's bringing to Mumbattan and the rest of the universes, but they're still having fun with him as he quote-unquote playfully boops the barrier button and discards the scientist from the control room. You have to give Spot some credit for being courteous enough to transport the scientist from the room instead of banishing them to eternal damnation and whatever goes on in those holes of his. It wasn't until rewatching and analyzing this scene for this video did I realize that this is the same group of people. I said in my initial review for this movie that this scene is like if Jesper got supervillain powers and never went on that life-changing field trip to Smearensburg, and I still stand by that. This is where we get the return of the amazing Collider leitmotif from the first film, except this time it's in a different key to tell the audience stuff is really going down now, more than ever before. This is also where Hobie, my guy, gets his grand entrance. I love the detail of Miles sitting down on one of the desks in the middle of this fight scene because he's so exasperated by Hobie's lack of consistency. They're all continuing to fight the Spot, and I love this shot right here. The way you expect Spot to be caught off guard by the spider's surprise attack, but he instead has these cat-like reflexes and yeets them across the room with the way he turns around with no in-between frames. His hunched back adds another layer of creepiness to him. It also shows how Spot is one step ahead of them by the frame rate. Originally, all four of them are moving on twos, meaning 12 frames per second or every other frame, which you can see extensively when watching both films. If you've ever wondered why the movies look laggy and like stop motion, that's why. If you've ever wondered why the movies look laggy and like stop motion, that's why. But when Spot turns around, he's on one, so every frame, which is a standard 24. That's why you're a little held back by the force of his throw, because it's so fluid compared to Pav, Hobie, and Gwen's movement. Also, the head of character animation said they purposely moved his holes to his arms as if they're helping with the momentum of him pushing that portal, and it's so cool. They look like little opera gloves. He's so classy. I love that 2-second reaction shot of Miles where he turns back to the Spot, and even though he's wearing his mask, you can tell his eyes are huge, and he truly is becoming terrified of this man. I just adore that their masks emote because that's really only something that can be done in animation, and it adds so much character to, well, the characters. The Spider-Verse movies in general are masters at reaction shots and character expressions. Of course there's Spot with how well his personality is shown through his body language as the movie progresses, but I love these various shots of Gwen with how you can see her terror when Peter almost pulls off her mask, her eyes brimming with tears, her glaring at her dad through her mask, the gears in her head turning when her dad tells her he's not going to be captain anymore, and the ever so slight eyebrow raise, beckoning Peter B to join her band to save Miles. Even going back to the first movie, one of my favorite shots is the one of Miles hyperventilating after he discovers that Aaron is the Prowler. Again, his wide eyes, and the fact that Pemberton's score goes all fortissimo not at Aaron unmasking himself, but Miles' reaction to further emphasize that this is his journey and it deepens our emotional connection with Miles, and I love it so much. Anyway, back to the scene. We have a little bit of an animation breakdown, once again done by Eric DeCarlis, who went for an awkward but also slightly creepy walk for Spot. I like how he's hunched over and lumbers over to Miles. It's really effective to show that this guy is just a little off. Oh, and the fact that Eric animated all the spots in this shot. Brava, man. We get this close-up when Spot says,
And I won't be just a joke to you!
As he raises his voice and one of his spots is almost trying to escape from his body. Even though it's one of those ink tools, there's something electric about it, like it's lightning you don't know where or when it'll strike. We first see it earlier when Spot tries to lunge at Miles, and again we get a taste of the darkness lurking beneath the character. For all I know, he could have stabbed it through Miles' face or something, I don't know. I would also like to pause for a moment and state the fact that this guy is beefing with the high schooler. Same goes for Miguel. Can these guys please go touch some grass? I just want to give this little ray gives Sunshine a hug. The collider sequence finally begins initializing as we see a beautiful barrage of hues emerge, somehow even more threatening than what we saw in the first film. It's a lot less bubbly and it's more unpredictable. The line work in the middle is undefined, but we also have these sharp, jagged edges so powerful that they knock the spiders off their swings, all while the dark matter splashes all over the place. Spot is still pretty playful with the way he waves goodbye. He's so silly, I love him. He levitates toward the collider as he fully submits for his body and perhaps even his soul to be consumed. Miles and the gang try to hold him back, and I love how subtly Spot turns his head toward them, as if there's a shred of humanity underneath all those pitch black voids that is willing to listen. Hobie continues to be the GOAT with one of the funniest lines in the movie.
I don't believe in comedy! Just kidding!
But as Miles is continuing to persuade him, the Spot already made up his mind. He raises his arm and simply... snip. They won't after this is such a perfect yet haunting comeback to Miles' attempt to reel him back. So despicable, so diabolical. The raising of his arm and scissor gesture is one of those shots I endlessly rewind. I love those moments when a villain says or does something so threatening yet they barely move a muscle. Aside from Spot, my favorite example would be this moment from The Lion King.
Kill him.
And we see Kingpin do something similar in the first movie.
Kill that guy.
It's another thing I really think can only be pulled off in animation, since the animator has control of keeping the entire body still, which could be more difficult for a live action actor to do. A villain having that kind of physical restraint could be as, if not more threatening than them making some exaggerated pose and yelling the line. And I think the reason why this shot is so impactful to me is not just that most of Spot's face is turned away from the camera, but because he can't emote, and coupled with Jason Schwartzman's awesome line delivery makes
So one after this.
you feel all the more colder. After the dark matter devours Spot, we begin seeing what the directors refer to as Spot vision, the abstract black and white sequences that are seen earlier display flashbacks from Spot's point of view, but this time it's used as a flash forward to ominously foretell the future to Miles. But hey, since they're not quote-unquote fully animated with color and lighting, it means it's not set in stone, so Miles does have the power to change things. Fun fact, these sequences were animated by the studio Titmouse, who did the intro for Avatar: The Last Airbender, and the art style was inspired by Italian illustrator Sergio Topi. One quick search on the interwebs, and you can immediately spot the influence. Going back to my lightning comment, we hear these electricity sounds as the dark matter becomes more unstable, but a lot happens in the Spot vision, so let's go through that. We start with the replay of Jonathan Owen's transformation, then to the future to show his body intertwined with Miles, perhaps alluding that they're, once again, not so different, I and you.
It's you and I!
We see various frames of what's to come, and I do mean frames since they only last a split second. There's these I can barely make out, but they look cool. There's a few of Miles. This one's pretty interesting since he's surrounded by other Spots, and it could be literal or metaphorical. And this one has him about to attack Spot, and he looks massive. However, this one's my favorite with Brooklyn reduced to a battlefield. So many spiders I hope are mostly dead, and oh my gosh, he killed Spider Plushie. He knocked the stuffing out of him. No! We get this really cool shot of him Uno reverse carting a bunch of cars and cabs, which was actually straight from another early animation test, which is awesome. Meanwhile, Spot lets out demonic roars as part of him is trying to almost escape himself. Since he's become the embodiment of the space-time continuum collapsing, his physical state has begun to reflect that. Dude, seriously. Getting these glimpses of Beyond the Spider-Verse and not knowing when we're gonna see it unfold just makes me want to gnaw my arm off. I guess going back to that Venom comparison earlier, he does kind of look like he has a symbiote. Miles sees a vision of his dad attempting to save a young child. Before he can do anything about it, he snaps back to reality with the Spot reflected in his mask, now in a fetal position. A multiversal menace is born. We get a legendary mashup of the Colliders and Spot's themes in Spot Holes 2, and again, might just be my favorite cue from the entire soundtrack. Trust me, I've adored Miguel's theme since day one, memes and all, but this, I can't even begin to describe the horror that trembled in my body during that Thursday night preview. I'd pay good money to see this movie for the first time again. At least I'll be able to hear it live in October, which is going to be incredible. It's here where Spot gets a fresh coat of paint, or rather ink, which the crew likes to refer to him as the Abyss. As he embraces his transformation, we get some disgustingly horrifying sound design that is out of this world. We get more of Wide-Eyed Miles and demonic reverb. And here we have it. My favorite shot, and even quite possibly favorite quote from the entire film. Let me break down why. Well, even more so. First of all, it combines all the techniques used throughout the movie into one singular shot, and it took months to finish this 2-second shot with an unfathomable amount of layers upon layers. The swirling black, gray, magenta, teal, purple, and white dark matter gives Spot such a unique color palette that I've never seen done before, let alone for a villain. I also love the way his body becomes fragmented and begins circling this imaginary drain. His disembodied head and arms do the same, and it ups the creep factor. Oh yeah, and during the opening scene we get a few frames of Spot get the Gwen Universe treatment with alternate colors since it's from her perspective perspective, and it looks gorgeous. The next thing I love about it is Jason Schwartzman's spine-chilling line delivery. Of course, I adore his response to Miles with,
"Our future. I'm gonna take everything from you. Like I took everything from me.
But I think there's a nuance to
See you back home, Spider-Man."
I know I keep using this word, but there's a playfulness to it. The screenplay is aware of this by how it describes it as Miles is deeply shaken by the frightening display, and Spot knows it, taunts him. As Miles attempts to process what he just witnessed, the score and sound effects become muted, and we get this amazingly smooth transition from third person to first person from his point of view, and we see the Mumbat and Alchemax crumble and the other spiders scrambling for their lives. He stumbles, but Gwen is there to help him out. Aww. This will sound even crazier, but I can hear and vividly picture the way Schwartzman delivers it in the recording booth. I imagine a small smile and shake of his head when he says, "See you back home," but then his smile fades and his brow furrows at Spider-Man. You can hear the disdain in his voice with the way he enunciates the P, too. It's as if you can hear the quotation marks, and I think it foreshadows Miguel later accusing Miles of being the anomaly and not being the real Spider-Man.
See you back home,
Spider-Man. I am so normal about this movie, can you tell? Another thing I love about it is how it compares to a shot from earlier on in the movie when Spot realizes he has the power of the multiverse in the palm of his hand.
I'm coming for you, Spider-Man!
Even though it's a vague threat, it makes the audience think, yeah, sure, okay man, since he's so chipper about it. Not even those poor construction guys care since they already have their backs turned against him. The camera is fixed on a wide shot with the construction workers in the foreground and Spot being reduced to the background as a small, insignificant, say it with me all, villain of the week. Despite that the edge of the frame is along here, the perspective with the lower angle makes Spot leave earlier as he disappears behind the staircase, further showcasing how little the movie thinks of him as his voice echoes in the vast, dilapidated collider room. This single shot expertly manipulates the audience into underestimating Spot, and is why his eventual turn to the dark side is all the more shocking and impactful. Compare that to said dark side shot where Spot is front and center of the frame, and the camera slowly pulls back to display the effects his existence is having on his surroundings with how the dark matter revolves around him like he's the sun. Mwah. Masterful. Do I love it as much as the What's Up Danger scene from the first movie? I'm not really sure. Part of me wants to say no because of how iconic the sequence has become in pop culture and animation history, perhaps even film history, and that it gets a bigger emotional reaction out of me since I have to wait almost the entire movie for that satisfying payoff. But even if I don't think it doesn't matter anyway since that wasn't the intention. Director Kent Powers stated in a Q&A that there isn't one. I had mentioned in my original view about whether or not we're going to get a shot as iconic as the upside down leap of faith, and looking back a year later I can say no, but I'm fine with it. You can make the argument that it'd be the Gwen and Miles shot. I don't think a movie is defined by its icon status with a single recognizable shot. There are so many other factors, like the fact that its box office return doubled what the first movie received, and its reviews believe it's as, if not better than said predecessor. Side note, on my most recent watch of Into, I've come to the conclusion that I prefer Cross over Into, which is saying a lot because I already adored Into with every fiber of my being. I believe it's better because of how masterful it expands upon the established story and somehow improves what was already perfect, like the animation, the score, still prefer the soundtrack though, the characters, and particularly the villains. Was I hoping it was going to win Best Animated Feature? Undoubtedly, but it going to Hayao Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli, and G-Kids instead is something I'm content with. Despite not having a so-called leap of faith moment or little golden statue, Across the Spider-Verse still leaps and soars by further cementing the Spider-Verse name as one of the finest works in the animation medium and public consciousness, taking more strides in pushing the boundaries of what mainstream animation can accomplish, both in art techniques and mature tones, and, of course, the memes. The memes. But now that Beyond the Spider-Verse doesn't have a release date, I'm left wondering,
Now what?
if you're looking for a concrete answer for this, I'm no insider, so I don't have one. The Lord and Miller do. Going back to the article I mentioned earlier, when asked if they know how the Spot will be defeated, they respond, "We actually do know how we're going to beat him, and it's very unexpected. How do you punch a hole? How do you kick a hole? It can't be done." With that frame of Miles, it seems like he's trying some offensive tactic and Spot will probably smack him away like a fly, so we'll be able to see that punching and kicking and the whipping won't work. One of the directors, Joaquim Dos Santos, directed the last two, aka the best episodes of Sozin's Comet from Avatar: The Last Airbender, so if anyone knows how to oversee a compelling, dramatic, and satisfying finale, it's him, and I can't wait. Honestly, it still blows my mind that Avatar and Across are related some way. Like, it's no wonder the movie's so good. In general, I'm really looking forward to seeing how they will continue that balance of Spot being funny and terrifying, but I don't really think they're going to lean into the latter 100%. Spider-Verse at its core is still partly comedy, so he's bound to be on the receiving end of a joke or two, or maybe he'll say something that he didn't intend to be a joke, but because he's so serious it ends up being funny. Kind of like Miguel, but I hope they don't make him too comedic that we lose the urgency of his screen presence. Speaking of which, there actually is an entire setting we never saw in Across that maybe could be in the third. It's this bar where all the Spider-Man baddies hang out, literally called the Bar with No Name. There were going to be these scenes of Spot being picked on by other villains and the main bartender Delilah, hey there, who is described by Kent Powers as someone who would probably be one of the deadliest villains in the city if she weren't tending to her bar. She has this blade on the tip of her ponytail that I love. There was going to be a payoff to that scene where Spot returns in his new form and roughs up those villains, but it was ultimately scrapped since it would disrupt the flow of his new creep factor. I don't know if they're saving it for Beyond or what, but I really want to see these deleted scenes. This was most likely in development before the movies got split in two, but it'd be interesting for all of this to see the light of day. I just know animation Twitter would have a field day with Delilah. Aside from this section of the art book, the only proof we have of these scenes is this test footage, which can actually be seen in the background of Miguel's lab. So, who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. In conclusion, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is a modern classic, and I can't get enough of it. From the eye-popping visuals, fantastic soundtrack, to Hobie's little chuckle when he helps Miles break free from Miguel's laser cage. During this long and painful drought of memorable animated movie villains, I am pleased to say that the Spot is that rare and bountiful rainfall that waters my animation-loving crops in this incredibly mixed metaphor. I can't wait to see what Jason Schwartzman, Daniel Pemberton, the animators, writers, directors, and many more will bring to the table for Beyond the Spider-Verse. But, of course, as I've been saying ever since the news broke, Lord, Miller, please treat your crew members with respect. Now I shall wait patiently for Beyond. Very, very patiently. Nope. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and join my Patreon for more videos on animated stuff, and I will see you later. Okay, bye! I just died in your arms tonight. What's the best I heard? What am I doing?